Well, hello people. In this video I would like to share you about intercultural communications under the title Verbal Message. So before I start sharing you about it, I'd like to introduce the member of the group which consists of Firmansyah, that is me, and my friend Riza Umami. So for the first speaker will be delivered by me. Okay, now I'm gonna explain you about the verbal message. Verbal message is also called as verbal communications. So before we directly know what verbal communication is, I had better tell you about what communication is. Well, communications is process of exchanging informations, ideas, thought, feeling, and emotions through speech signal, writing, or even behavior. So, for example, when we do conversation with our friends, parents, or even our lecturer, of course, there will be something that we want to deliver or ask to someone that we talk to. And it could be like informations, suggestions, questions, and etc. And then, how can we deliver it? Yeah, it could be from conversations, speech signal, writing, or even behavior. That's pretty much of simple explanations about communications. Okay, now let's move to the next slide. That is about communication is two-way process. In communication two-way process, it consists of two things. For the first, sender to receiver, it is called message. And second, receiver to sender, it is called feedback. For the first is message. It is like what I have told you in the previous slide. Yeah, it will be like information, suggestion, and etc. But for the feedback, will be like questions or even suggestion. Yeah, that's what communication is two-way process means. Yeah, it could be called as communications cycle. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Now, I will share you about verbal communications. Verbal communications refers to the form of communications in which message is transmitted verbally. Communication is done by word, mouth, and a piece of writing. So, for example, when we do conversations, the form of our message must be verbally or spoken. And how can we deliver or how to deliver our message? So, actually, we can deliver by word, mouth, or and a piece of writing. So in this case, maybe some of you wondering how could writing is included to verbal communications option. Okay, I will make it clear for you by giving you an example. For example, if I write a sentence, I love you, in a piece of paper, it means that my sentence speaks to someone about how my feeling to her is. That's how the writing option speaks or works. Okay, next. Merits of verbal communications. It is also called as the advantages of verbal communications. For the first, we have make personal and informal. So, for the example, when you do conversation face to face between you and your friends means that conversation is personal and that conversation is informal. For the second, we have makes immediate impact. So, when you do conversation face to someone, of course, you will know their idea or even their emotions at that time directly. And the third, we have provides opportunity for interaction and feedback. So, by doing this conversation face to face, it will provide you to interact directly, and also you or him can give feedback directly. And the fourth, we have help us correct ourselves. Means that this direct conversation will assist you to correct the mistake that you made by the one who you speak to. Of course, when sometime if you or we make mistake of our sentences, it could be from our diction, so directly our opponent will fix it or will correct it. And the fifth is it is fastest and less expensive, means that you will get the information or suggestion or even the idea from someone directly. So it will be given by them directly to us. And less expensive means that we do it directly offline, means like we do not make any conversation in online, like in social media. Next, memories of verbal communications. It is also called as the disadvantages of verbal communications. Okay, for the first we have it can be quickly forgotten. For the example is like what I am doing right now. I have been explaining or sharing you about the verbal communications before. So in this case, there will be possibility for me to forget about what I explained or shared to you before in previous slide and vice versa. And second, we have a words once uttered cannot be taken back. For example, it's like what I'm doing right now. I'm giving you an example, and I must be careful and pay much attention about giving the example because once I utter, it cannot be taken back. Moreover, this is a video. And the third, we have there is no legal evidence of oral communications. Of course, it is because the one evidence that we still have is only memory. By memory, we still have possibility to remember about what we or they talked before and vice versa. That's why it states there is no legal evidence. Next, now we have oral communications and written communications. Oral communications. In oral communication, spoken words are used. It includes face-to-face conversation, speech, telephonic conversation, video, radio, television, voice over internet. I think this is clear enough that oral communications must be spoken and form as words. Okay, next it is written communication. In written communication, message can be transmitted via email, letter, report, memo, etc. Message in written communication is influenced by the vocabulary and grammar used, writing style, precision, and clarity of the language used. So, in this written message, we must pay more attention on vocabulary, grammar, precision, and the clarity of the language to avoid ambiguity and misunderstanding.
Well, everybody, I'm the second speaker of the fifth group. My name is Riza. Well, let me explain you the next sub-theme of the verbal message is language and culture. Well, everybody, one of the most difficult and problems encountered in intercultural communication is exactly language differences. And now we turn to some of those differences and see how they make influence in intercultural interaction. There are three kinds of differences language problem. They are first language and tough, and the second is the language variation, and the third is using language. First is language and tough. We may assume that everyone speaks and thinks in the same ways that just use different words. When word and meaning is different from one culture to another, thought process and perception is exactly also different. These differences in perception, many of them subconscious and have influence on how people think and use language. That's dynamic culture called by linguistic relativity. Sapir and Worf um, argue that language is profoundly shaped the perception and also worldview of its speaker. For example, like in the Hindi language in India, they call uncle as father's young brother, or father's older brother, or mother's older brother, and so on. In other example, Bonfilians say that if English speakers say that I must go there, but Navajo speaker will speak will speak, it is only good that I shall go there. Another example, like if English speakers say that I make the horse run, but Navajo speaker will say that the horse is running for me. And the next is language variation. I believe that all of you have known and familiar with the word language variation, or even understand well what the language variation is it. But right now I will try to remembering you what language variation. First is accent. Accent is the pronunciation of someone. Action, accent have the potential to create two problems in intercultural exchange. First, if the speaker's accent is prominent, the comprehension or the understanding may be impeded or there will be trouble while the understanding. For example, like people from the United States will be able or easy to understand people from New England, but it will be contradictive with Indian people because Indian people speaking English with Hindi accent. And the second one, speaker may be negatively stereotyped by their accent. We know that stereotype is really generalize some a person to a people. But this is stereotyping people is a type of prejudice because what is on the outside is a small part of who a person is it. And the next one is dialect. If accent refers to the pronunciation of someone, the dialect will refers to the spoken grammar and vocabulary as well. Dialect not only identifies someone as being from a certain region, but also distinctive or differences of person's country. For example, like in the Japanese, we have heard or we familiar with the name Kagoshima Ben or Okinawa Ben. If it is difficult, I will try to make another example. In Korean, we have familiar with Ri Jong Hyuk or Hyungnim or Shindong A or yes, something like that. Remember, in intercultural communication, dialect and accent present challenge. It seems that these two language characteristics can carry negative connotations since some people wrongly use them to stereotype the speaker. And the next one is argot. I think all of you never hear what is argot is it. Argot is language that used by gangster because this is what is it secret language that used by gangster, so there will be what is it a special vocabulary that used by certain group or certain people that uh, as a member of a certain gangster. And the next one is slang. We know that slang is the informal language. Slang is very informal language or specific word used by a particular group of people. You usually we have known slang language. For example, like in United States, jerk means that stupid or uncool person. For example, like what jerk you are means that how stupid, what a stupid or uncool person. And the next one is texting. Texting is like abbreviation. For example, like as soon as possible, we can call by ASAP. Or what is that? See you later. C U and L. And then last is idioms. We know that if idioms cannot um, translate one by one the vocabulary. If it is we translate it one by one, if it is we are translate one by one the vocabulary, it will be different meaning. For example, like be glad to see the back of means that in the idioms be happy when a person leave, but when we translate it one by one by one the word, it will be we are very happy to see the backbone of the someone, but means in the contradictive the meaning of the be glad to see the back of is be happy when a person leave. And the next one is using language. Well, everybody, we know that every single country in the world has their own language or has their own style of language, of the way of their speaking. Here, I will tell you some of country that has a unique or style language. First is English. Language used most by US American is direct, blunt, frank, and unequivocal. Means that frank is honestly, clearly. So if it is they do not understand, if it is they do not agree with something, they will say no. Clearly they will say no. If it is they agree with something or they like something, they will clearly say yes. And also US American frequently use I in conversation and writing. For example, like when there is a workshop, there is a workshop or there is a assignment such as making makalah or essay in a group. If it is the lecture asks about who is made this essay or who is made this makalah, the US American will say I, not our, not us, not we, but I, because if it is I, it is not means ambigu or vagueness. It is they use what is that we or our, but means that who made uh, clearly made the proposal or the essay or the makalah, because we present some of people, not but some of people. There's no any specific person who made this proposal or this essay or makalah, but and also the reason is why they use I in conversation and writing, because they avoid ambiguities or vagueness, and also they propose themselves. If it is me and I made this for you, this proposal. And the next one is Spanish. The first is the communicative interaction is casual talk, open and generous. And the second one, the male is highly positioned. For example, like male is in Spanish, we can call by elos, and female we can call by elas. O in elos means masculine, and a in female is elas means is feminine. And also A group of boy we can call by ninos, and a group of girl we can call by ninas. If there is a group consists of boys and a girl, some boys and one girl we can call by ninos, and when a group consists of some girls, many girls, and just there is one boy we can call by ninos. So male is highly clearly highly positioned in every single group and every single area in Spanish, and also the Spanish say in indirect speech. And the next one is, for example, Northeast Asian. Actually, in the book there some of example of Northeast Asian, but I just put the Korean because I think this is a very, what is it, famous or attractive attractive country to be understanding. For example, like collectivism or group orientation, status and harmony, and also the way the Korean people introducing her or his parent or even other people, they will prefer use, for example, like they introducing her or his parent, they will prefer use this is our mother or father rather than my, because back to the first reason, they are group orientation, so our is more present representative of group orientation. This is our mother or father, not my. If just only my and my just one person. And the next one, indirectness. For example, like when a manager asks to the subordinate or the employment to not free at the weekend, the managers will say the success of this project is important to the company and we cannot miss the deadline. Means that they do not say to the point, but they say in the other word, but the meaning is same, but means indirectness. And the next one is Arabic. Language is social conduit in which emotional resonance is stressed, but rather than transferring information. Means that uh, in Arabic, language is just a voice that stress rather than transferring information. And the next one, US American can express their idea in 10 words, but in Arabic speaker, they may use 100 words to express their idea. And the last one, the Arabic speaker is ambiguous. When they talk about future, they will say inshallah to say future event. Contradictive or contrastly with US American or others, they will say yes but at an unspecified future time. No in order to avoid responsibility, and never indirect. That's all the what is it? The language styles of some of the country in the world. And the next one is interpreting. We know that word interpreting and translating is almost same, both interpreting and translating. So we should mention early in our analysis that the terms translating and interpreting are often confused. Translator work with written material and have the advantages of being able to consult references if needed and are not subject to the same time constraint as interpreter. As interpreter deal with spoken and sign language. Because interpreting is usually in a real time, not delay, it is often not as accurate as translating. In addition, interpreters are usually required to be familiar with the cultures of both the original language and the target of language. This means they need an extensive vocabulary and must be ready to make quick decisions.
Okay, there are two most common forms of interpreting. For the first is consecutive interpretations, and the second is simultaneous interpretations. For the consecutive interpretation is when you stop every minute or so to allow the interpreter to relay your message in the other language. It is like most often used in a high-level private activities. So in this case, we will do communications directly in the real life as face-to-face, such as like business meeting and small informal gatherings. In this consecutive interpreting method, the speaker will talk for a short time and then stop to allow the interpreter to convey the message. That is how the consecutive interpretations works. While simultaneous interpretation is done while the speakers are talking in their native language. A good interpreter should have knowledge of the target language, dialect, spatial terminology, and culture. While simultaneous interpretation uses audio equipment with the interpreter located in a soundproof booth away from the participants. This method makes the speaker speaks continuously or the speaker does not pause their speaking, of which it will make the interpreter must listen the speaker carefully. And the speaker's fluency in the target language must be good, I mean must be perfect, in order to avoid misunderstanding and miscommunication.